What is up? Welcome into yet another edition of the Ben Garcia Show. Benstant reaction, an instant reaction to breaking news, a game that just happened, or something that needs an instant reaction to it directly after it has just happened. So let's jump right into it. Jahan Dotson has been traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and this isn't one of those things where being traded to the Philadelphia Eagles really means much. Jahan Dotson, a former first-round pick, traded for a third-round pick and some other things that, again, don't really matter as much. That's not necessarily what I'm going to focus on. Quickly on the Eagles side of things, I think it's a good value for a guy who has been a very productive receiver in the NFL. He's never really had the quarterback talent to help supplement what he can do offensively. So I think a good fit over with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. And being able to be that underneath guy, a possession receiver, adds yet another bit of value to that Eagles offense that was already loaded. So adding another guy to that aspect does help them in their quest to win the NFC East and make a large, or I guess I should say a long run through the playoffs. But this is where it kind of struck me right away when I saw the news that Jahan Dotson was traded from the Washington Commanders to the Philadelphia Eagles. And even at a larger scale, this is why I'm just out on Jaden Daniels, and more specifically, I guess I should say I'm out on Jaden Daniels at minimum in the short term, potentially in the long term. Didn't love what I saw in college, but that's not necessarily what I'm going towards. In a much grander scale, a much bigger scale, I'm just out on the Washington Commanders. I'm just out on the Washington Commanders. And here's why. You know that this trade had to absolutely be greenlit by the offensive coordinator. Who's the offensive coordinator? Kliff Kingsbury. And why do I have such a strong reaction to an offensive coordinator for a team that isn't even a potential Super Bowl winning team and a very outside chance of making the playoffs? That is because Kliff Kingsbury was the head coach of the team I have covered for the last however long, a while now, years at this point for the Arizona Cardinals. Not working for the Arizona Cardinals, but covering the Arizona Cardinals. Kliff Kingsbury is a debacle. He ruins everything he touches. He has failed up everywhere he's went. And I would just like to ask this question. Name one time Kliff Kingsbury has succeeded in his career as a coach. When? I just want one time. When has Kliff Kingsbury ever succeeded? But somehow this idea of him being an offensive guru has just grown in the NFL for God knows what reason. For God knows what reason. The Cardinals' offense was lackluster and at times was just carried by Kyler Murray. People still blame Kyler Murray for the shortcomings of the Arizona Cardinals when in reality, the shortcomings of the Arizona Cardinals were from Kliff Kingsbury and the GM Steve Keim. And this is why another reason that I'm just not super in on the Jaden Daniels sweepstakes. Not because Jaden Daniels is a bad quarterback. Or I'm sorry, not because I think he's an awful quarterback. But because Jaden Daniels in college, I watched him at Arizona State, up close and personal, with my own eyes. I didn't love what I saw. Granted, he was a freshman, goes over to LSU, and what happens after that? He flourishes. Brian Thompson Jr., Malik Neighbors, you add Brian Kelly to that mix. It just seemed like he had to be supported tremendously to really get to where he wanted to go. He's very small, very thin, is a crash test dummy at times. He's got to do better at being able to protect himself. And also, when you add to it that he was just on a high-powered offense at LSU where a lot of quarterbacks just succeed, it really does worry me about Jaden Daniels. And the fact that he is just a thin guy, a small player in the NFL, it worries me that he could struggle with some injuries. But even more so, I'm not completely out on Jaden Daniels succeeding in the NFL because fit matters. And I just hate the fit of Kliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels on the Washington Commanders. And just another point of emphasis for me. Another reason to be against Kliff Kingsbury. is he A-okayed this trade. And Kliff Kingsbury has been a bad, poor evaluator of talent, along with Steve Keim, and continuously putting teams in the worst position to succeed. The Washington Commanders are going to flame out horrendously this year, and I am so out on the Washington Commanders because everywhere Kliff Kingsbury has been the offensive coordinator or has coached in the NFL, and you can't put any trust in the guy. You cannot have any trust into Kliff Kingsbury being able to run your team. Look at everywhere he's been. Failed at Texas Tech, was a bad quarterback there. And you just can't trust the guy anywhere he's been. And you look at all the different areas that Kliff Kingsbury's been, all the different places that he's coached, all the different places that he's been the OC, and look at what happened to the team. Under 500 coach at Texas Tech, somehow fails up into the NFL and was a poor head coach. There was a lack of maturity on the team. There was a lack of discipline on the team. Led the NFL in penalties multiple times. Was an undisciplined team. Lack of maturity. They called it Camp Kliff Kingsbury during training camp because they had phone breaks and snack breaks. He's soft on discipline. He's a poor head coach. His route concepts are bad. He didn't move DeAndre Hopkins around like he should have. Kept him on one side of the field, running the same routes. His offense is very simple, a very simple air raid offense that lacked the air raid aspect of Kliff Kingsbury. A lot of behind the line of scrimmage and a lot of sub 6 foot, but mostly 5'8" and under wide receivers. Think about that Cardinals team. Rondale Moore, Andy Isabella, small guys. I mean, he was the guy that implemented Greg Dortch at the time. And now Greg Dortch is the smallest wide receiver on that Cardinals team, in which there's a ton of 6 foot guys. You can have one small dude, but that's not what happened. It was nothing but small wide receivers on this team. He's bad at personnel. He's bad at judgment. And it's just tough for me. It's just really tough for me to get my arms around Jaden Daniels succeeding in the NFL strictly because Kliff Kingsbury is his offensive coordinator. This is what's going to happen. It is obvious and it is shown everywhere he's went. Look at USC. Do you think it's a coincidence that when Kliff Kingsbury shows up on the offensive side of the ball, Caleb Williams has his worst year in college? Now, I'm not saying it's directly correlative, but the guy's there. He's helping coach him. He's poor at what he does. I ask for everyone and any fan that was hoping to get Kliff Kingsbury as their OC of their team. Look at his track record. Look at his history. Where has he succeeded? Expect a BB gun offense from the Washington Commanders and consistently putting Jaden Daniels in positions not to succeed. This is a bad fit for Jaden Daniels and a guy that I was already kind of low on in college because of what I saw at Arizona State. And then putting him with Kliff Kingsbury is just a bad fit. It's just a bad fit. And seeing this Jahan Dotson thing, a capable wide receiver who is just nearly 6 foot at 5'11", on a offensive team that doesn't have a lot of weapons, it just reeks of Kliff Kingsbury's evaluation process of ruining a team from within. This is what he has constantly done everywhere he's went. And then you see this Jahan Dotson trade. You get rid of a guy who was a former first-round pick for a third-round pick, essentially just a third-round pick. You send him over to the Eagles, who everyone says, Howie Roseman, pretty good GM. It just is insane to me that they would move off of a wide receiver who's a good possession guy that on a Commanders team that kind of lacks offensive talent. I mean, their running back one right now is Brian Robinson. And now it's a lot of Terry McLaurin and Stu Gotts. Kliff Kingsbury will be the downfall of this Commanders team, and I can promise you, anyone and everyone who watches Roots or covers the Commanders will cite Jaden Daniels' lack of progression in the offense and in the NFL solely on the lackadaisical, simple, and just awful offensive scheme that Kliff Kingsbury puts out. People will be complaining that Terry McLaurin is not being used accordingly. The run game is not being used accordingly. Jaden Daniels is put in bad positions. And that is what will be the story of the Commanders this year. And it's why I'm so low on the fit of Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. And it's why I'm low on them to succeed this NFL season.